Hello and welcome to News Round, a recap of stories that made headlines during the week. I am Bukola Kolka. The headlines. House of Representatives Committee on Aviation calls for suspension of Nigeria Air. Says project was shrouded in secrecy. Lawmakers emotional as 9th House of Representatives comes to an end. President Bola Tinubu's administration begins to take shape as he swears in Senator George Akume as the new secretary to the government of the Federation. Plus, water levels rise in Kherson in southern Ukraine after a major dam in the Russian-occupied town of Nova Kakhovka was breached on Tuesday morning. That's News Round indeed. And we begin News Round with the recently unveiled Nigeria Air, which the House of Representatives Committee on Aviation has described as shoddy and capable of tarnishing Nigeria's image. The committee is asking for the suspension of the operations of Nigeria Air and calls for prosecution of all those involved in the project. This was after the Senate Committee on Aviation also criticized the unveiling of Nigeria Air, saying the project was shrouded in secrecy. These are officials of the Ministry of Aviation and the interim management of Nigeria Air. They are before the Senate Committee on Aviation to answer questions on the status of the nation's national carrier, Nigeria Air, which was unveiled during the twilight of the Buhari administration. But questions have been raised about the whereabouts of the aircraft and the status of the airline after some Nigerians traced the aircraft, noting that it returned to Ethiopian Airlines service. These senators have strong words for the representatives of the Aviation Ministry over the manner Nigeria Air was launched.
The Nigeria Air project. The issue was shrouded in secrecy to the extent that it was fraudulently displayed as a new national carrier, contrary to the extant court order and international rules that strictly guided airline operations. This indeed was an embarrassment to the committee.
Why will you, for whatever reason, having an interim MD, be in a hurry to unveil a national carrier on the last day of your administration? Why?
But the interim managing director, Nigeria Air, says the airline was unveiled at the time it was to prove to Nigerians that the project is not a fluke.
The aircraft that came in and left was a legitimate charter flight. You see, ever since 2018, all you'd ever seen about Nigeria Air aircraft were pictures, drawings, not the real aircraft. And we felt it was time to show what the real aircraft would look like.
Was it reasonably necessary? You know, you have to take this to take taxpayers' money and charter an aircraft all the way from Ethiopia to come here and for unveiling, if the purpose is just to show Nigerians how the aircraft is going to. We have had the pictures on social media when it was unveiled in Fambro.
He also clarifies what he says are misconceptions of the status of a national carrier.
We haven't got a license yet to operate. If you had asked me the question, I could, not you, I mean if the social media had asked me the question, I would have said, we haven't got to that stage yet. We are not at the point of operating the airline yet, at all.
The representatives from the Aviation Ministry and Nigeria Air then proceed to the House of Representatives to meet with the lower chambers Aviation Committee. The committee chairman says members do not support the launch of the airline because of a lack of supporting and necessary documents.
We are not part of the launch and we do not support the launch, especially at a time issues are yet to be cleared. The committee hereby resolved to 1. Direct the Federal Ministry of Aviation and its partners in the Nigeria Air project to immediately suspend any operations regarding to Nigeria Air and every other action with respect to Nigeria Air.
The committee further advises that the Federal Ministry of Aviation, with its agency, the NCAA, should designate some Nigerian indigenous airlines as carriers to take advantage of bilateral air services agreements entered into by Nigeria, pending when a viable national carrier comes on board. Linda Akibi, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives has held its valedictory session to mark the end of the 9th House. Lawmakers were emotional as they spoke about working together in the past 4 years. In his final speech as Speaker, Mr. Femi Gbajabiamila made a case for young Nigerians, many of whom he says are leaving the country to fulfill their dreams. He says the country must act now to restore their faith.
It is the very last plenary session of the 9th House of Representatives. The Green Chamber is filled even beyond capacity in preparation for a valedictory session. But first, a brief plenary session is held to consider some reports, one of which is that of the ad hoc committee which investigated the alleged loss of $2.4 billion due to the illegal sale of 48 million barrels of crude oil in 2014.
The DSS themselves carried out an investigation and concluded that these allegations were false and unsubstantiated, and that these individuals were fraudulent and were only interested in obtaining money from the government. And this exactly is the finding that the committee made.
Then it's time for the valedictory session. As is customary, the House admits former presiding officers, House leadership and clerks. The Speaker kicks off the session with his final address as Speaker of the 9th House of Representatives, even as he steps aside as a member of the House since the past 20 years to take up his new role as Chief of Staff to the President.
I assure you that in this new role, I will work to ensure a cordial and productive relationship between the executive and legislative arms of government, whilst respecting the independence and prerogatives of the legislature.
Then the goodwill messages begin.
But Mr. Speaker, in your new role, we have not been able to reach an El Dorado. Mr. Speaker, the judicial officers of this country are still wallowing in their poor working and living condition, Mr. Speaker.
One thing I personally achieved is that I'm a better Nigerian. I've been able to travel all the states of the Federation for oversight functions, and I've seen a lot. So I'm a better Nigerian. My only setback is that all our female bills, all our gender bills, Mr. Speaker, have not been able to pass through.
We have lost so many number of our colleagues, starting from Ekwayon Basi, from Akwa Ibom, Jude Eden, Edo, Fagogawu Jigawa, Kila Yuguda Asa from Jigawa again, Osi Prestige from Abia, Murtala Aruna from Plateau, Omalafe Adebayo from Mundo. Today, must give them that 1 minute silence, which is very important.
A minute of silence is observed in honor of members who passed away in the course of the 9th Assembly. Former Speaker of the 6th Assembly, Patricia Ete, presents a goodwill message on behalf of former speakers. To wrap up the event, certificates are presented to the leaders of the House as lawmakers bid each other farewell. And it's goodbye to the 9th House of Representatives. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
The office of the presidency is gradually taking shape as President Bola Tinubu has sworn in Senator George Akume as the new secretary to the government of the Federation at the council chamber. Senator Akume, the immediate past Minister of Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs, took his oath of allegiance and oath of office at a brief ceremony which was attended by dignitaries, including some serving and former governors. Meanwhile, the president has directed the National Economic Council, led by Vice President Kashim Shettima, to come up with interventions to mitigate the impact of subsidy removal on Nigerians. He also held his maiden meeting with the Nigerian Governors Forum.
Barely 72 hours after President Bola Tinubu announced a new secretary to the government of the Federation, he proceeds to swear him in a ceremony witnessed by the Vice President Kashim Shettima, governors and former governors, as well as well-wishers.
I, Senator George Akume, do solemnly swear
that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the Federal Republic of Nigeria, except as may be required by the due discharge of my duties as Secretary to the Government of the Federation. So help me God.
In the short ceremony, Senator George Akume, the 70-year-old former Benue State governor from 1999 to 2007, becomes the 21st Secretary to the Government of the Federation.
I assure Nigerians I will do my best. I will not disappoint the president. I will not disappoint this country. I will not disappoint my party. I believe Nigerians will find fulfillment in my responsibilities as I discharge them in their own interest.
Shortly after the president met for the first time since assuming office, all governors under the aegis of the Nigeria Governors Forum in the council chamber. According to a statement released after the meeting, the state governors promised to do everything within their powers to ameliorate the short-term impact of the president's fuel subsidy decision.
Good afternoon.
Separately, the president received more solidarity over his latest resolve to implement the removal when he met with major oil marketers led by the Ogun State governor, who is also a former chairman of the Oil Marketers Association. Addressing State House correspondents, Governor Abiodun conveys the president's directive to the National Economic Council on the matter.
Mr. President has announced today that, NEC should immediately begin to sit, led by His Excellency, the Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, and the committee of NEC alongside, with the economic team and marketers should sit down and come up with a wholesome approach that would be beneficial to the common man and generality of Nigerians.
Consequently, the major oil marketers reveal their intervention plans.
We all collectively agree that we're going to work at providing real mass transit buses that work. The ones that will run on CNG, which is the compressed natural gas and diesel, interchangeably. And hopefully we're going to start with about 50 to 100. And that is in the very, very short term.
They're like 50-seater buses. The buses are probably at the cost of about 100 million naira each. So they are donating 100 buses, that's 10 billion, just from the marketers. By the grace of God, within the next 30 days, we are going to be launching what we call our e-mobility, which allows us to take our petrol-powered Okadas back from the riders and offer them electric motorcycles. So you will begin to see this kind of initiatives across the length and breadth of the country.
Like other Nigerians, the major oil marketers have hailed the president's decision not to procrastinate the fuel subsidy removal, expressing confidence that other alternatives like the compressed natural gas, electric cars are very good, viable, sustainable means and diversification plans that can ameliorate the sufferings of many Nigerians going forward. From the presidential villa, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
And when News Round returns, President Bola Tinubu suspends Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, with immediate effect. Stay with us.
Like drops of rain, individuals and groups innovate, birthing ideas that might make the difference in the conversations and action to fight climate change and the negative impact of man's activities. Innovative thinking from Africa and Europe to save our planet, to light up our cities without tearing apart the ozone, making progress safe and sustainable. On Eco Africa, we highlight the efforts to live and grow sustainably at these times on Channels Television.
Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser. Or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple TV, Android TV, Fire TV, and Roku. Channels Television, ubiquitous.
Welcome back. The leadership race of the 10th National Assembly is still high up the priority list of President Bola Tinubu, who has appealed to traditional rulers to counsel those vying for principal offices to manage their ambitions in order to reach a harmonious conclusion. At an interactive session with the royal fathers, the president also assured them that his administration will run an open-door policy.
The convergence of royal fathers under the aegis of the National Council of Traditional Rulers of Nigeria to meet with the President Bola Tinubu comes nearly 3 months since the council unilaterally congratulated the president on his electoral victory. The Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Senator George Akume, and other top government officials are also present at this inaugural meeting with the Council, which is co-led by the Sultan of Sokoto, Alhaji Sa'ad Abubakar III, and the Oni of Ife, His Royal Highness, Oba Adeyeye Ogunwusi, among other top traditional leaders. In an emotive address, the president urges the royal fathers to intervene in the leadership tussle of the 10th National Assembly before its inauguration, which is barely 4 days away.
We have only 2 chairs. Senate President, 1 chair. The Speaker, 1 chair. If I have 6 people struggling in the same environment, they will talk. They will talk. So it's only through your counseling, your refuge that we can harmonize and take off very, very well.
The president again defends his decision on the fuel subsidy removal.
Why should we, in good sense, in good heart, feed smugglers, be a Father Christmas to the neighboring country, and think we did the right thing? It's in your hand. As the closest people to the local government, to the grassroots, to persuade our people to have the understanding. This price will be high now, but it will go down.
He assures that power generation is one challenge the government has proffered intervention.
Power generation cannot be embarked upon by state government. The bill has been signed.
The president's job at this time is not an envious one, the royal fathers acknowledge as they pledge loyalty.
Mr. President, we don't envy you, as even the leadership of this country at this time. But we believe if you stick to your faith and believe in the will of Almighty in whatever you do to carry this country to the highest height, you will succeed.
Please do not underestimate what we traditional rulers can do. We can complement your government. We can complement the betterment of this country. We can actually complement and make the work a lot easier for you. Use us, Mr. President. Use us, Mr. President. We want to work with you and make sure that Nigeria is a better place.
Now, working hard to realize expectations of many Nigerians is at the heart of calls by the president to the royal fathers. He's categorical about a decision not to deviate from the business of governance, and as a matter of fact, he has vowed to remove anything that constitutes a roadblock on the progress of the nation. From the presidential villa, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
And the Senate has given a nod to President Bola Tinubu's request for approval to appoint 20 special advisors. The president's letter was read by Senate President Ahmed Lawan at the beginning of plenary, although no names were attached to the letter. Senate leader Ibrahim Gobir moved that the lawmakers should consider the request and was seconded by the Senate Minority Leader Philip Aduda.
As the 9th National Assembly winds down, the Senate attends to what is perhaps the final piece of communication it will likely receive from the new President Bola Tinubu. The President seeks approval of the Senate for appointments.
We feel that this is something that is of utmost urgency. He wants to appoint his advisors, but he needs our approval here. And therefore, we should do that for him to be able to probably today or tomorrow announce his appointees, special advisors. So those in favor of the motion moved by the Senate leader and seconded by the by the minority leader, that the Senate approves the request of Mr. President C for his request on the 20 special advisors. Say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.
It's a full house and a full day in the House of Representatives as lawmakers sit for one last time before their valedictory session on Wednesday. The President's letter of request to appoint 20 special advisors is also read in the Green Chamber with no mention of approval. Not surprisingly, the issue of fuel subsidy and the averted labor strike is raised as a matter of urgent national importance.
Recognizes the rights of the Nigerian Labour Congress, NLC, to engage in strike action on matters that impact the well-being of Nigerian workers. Also recognizes the potential consequences of the proposed strike, including increased hardship for Nigerians, loss of work hours, and financial resources. Item of the day.
The day is packed full with last-minute reports turned in by committees for consideration as the 9th House of Representatives wraps up. The House considers the report of the Conference Committee on a bill for an act to make comprehensive provisions for the prohibition and punishment of sexual harassment of students by educators in tertiary educational institutions. Next, the House considers the report of its ad hoc committee on the state of refineries to ascertain the actual cost of rehabilitating the nation's refineries. The committee outlines its findings and calls for a forensic audit of all the rehabilitation projects in the refineries. Legislative work in the 9th House of Representatives wraps up with a valedictory session on Wednesday, as the 10th House of Representatives members prepare to be sworn in a week's time. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
In another development, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has suspended the central bank governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, from office with immediate effect. According to a statement from the Office of the Secretary to the Government, the suspension is equal to the ongoing investigation of his office and the planned reforms in the financial sector of the economy. Mr. Emefiele has been directed to immediately hand over the affairs of his office to the Deputy Governor, Operations Directorate, who will act as the central bank governor pending the conclusion of investigation and the reforms. Presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Mr. Peter Obi, says he has not gotten the needed cooperation of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to access the BVAS machines used in the February 2023 general elections. His counsel, Mr. Ben Anichebe, told journalists at the tribunal in Abuja that while the electoral body has substantially cooperated with them in gaining access to certified true copies of results, it is yet to do so with the bimodal voter accreditation system, BVAS, deployed for the elections. Meanwhile, the PDP presidential candidate, Mr. Atiku Abubakar, called 4 more witnesses to testify in his case against INEC, the All Progressives Congress, and President Bola Tinubu.
The first sitting of the week in the ongoing 2023 Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal begins with the case Alhaji Atiku Abubakar versus the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, President Bola Tinubu and his vice, and the All Progressives Congress. Counsel to the petitioner calls up 4 more witnesses who served as state collation agents for the PDP during the elections. All 4 witnesses reaffirmed their statement on oath, insisting that the results announced by the electoral body were manipulated. Under cross-examination, the witnesses told the court that Mr. Abubakar did not score the 25% in the FCT. Nevertheless, one of the witnesses insists that Mr. Abubakar should be returned as the winner of the February 25 presidential elections. So far, Mr. Abubakar has called 10 witnesses to prove his case. Having exhausted the number of witnesses for the day, the court adjourned to Tuesday, June 6 for further hearing.
Generally, the thrust of our case today was that the INEC was hasty and wrong in declaring Tinubu the winner of the elections, because every evidence shows that he did not win. And that is our case today. 4 witnesses testified along that line.
Back in the courtroom, the next matter for the day is the case of Mr. Peter Obi of the Labour Party against INEC, President Tinubu and his vice, as well as the All Progressives Congress. The petitioner tendered more evidence, which are certified true copies of INEC election results from 8 states. The tribunal admitted the evidence from the petitioner, though all the respondents are opposed to it. On the sideline of the courtroom, counsel to the petitioner told journalists that his client has not enjoyed adequate cooperation from INEC regarding having access to the beavers machine used for the elections.
INEC has improved in their cooperation. Substantial documentation has been availed, while about 20% now are still outstanding. I think about 20% thereabouts. I'm not exactly sure. I know not all, particularly the issue of beavers. They have not been able to give us proper cooperation on that.
The tribunal has adjourned the matter to Tuesday, June 6, 2023 for further hearing.
And to end news round, a pier in the city of Kherson went underwater after the Nova Kakhovka Dam further up the Dnipro River was breached. A local resident said the water level in one of the Dnipro River's tributaries in Kherson had risen by 1 meter. Ukraine accused Russia of blowing up the dam from inside in a deliberate war crime, but Russian-installed officials gave conflicting accounts. Some blaming Ukrainian shelling, others saying the dam had burst on its own. The Nova Kakhovka Dam supplies water to Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula and the Zaporizhia nuclear plant, both under Russian control. And that's it on News Round for today. Thank you for watching. Of course, we'll have updates at the top of the hour. I am Bukola Koka. Bye for now.